how do the special forces benefit from AI?
I think first it's important to understand their mission, part of their mission is to generate and constantly update deep contextual understanding of an area or a system or a requirement for collection, whatever it happens to be. But that's what they do day in and day out in what's called operational preparation of the battle space. And so this deep contextual understanding is turned into a digital understanding of the area. And that's how we get over into the AI side of the equation. And we do it in order to ensure that we have the best decisions at the quickest timelines and the greatest quality. And those are the things that AI dramatically improves over the very linear, manpower intensive systems of today. And so that's where we look to AI in this mission space to give us a competitive advantage out in the battle space. They do it principally through the infrastructure that has been put in place over the last 5 to 10 years, really. Um, that infrastructure is global and it's ubiquitous, and that's what differentiates it. So think of things like position, navigation, and time. Those are all encased in the GPS constellations that we have in space. Think of networks that move the information, do some processing of the information, some of the distribution of the information, etc. Those networks are now starting to become mature. They are global. Think in the commercial sector of something like Starlink.
Mhm.
Those types of networks that can be found anywhere, anytime, and are available to anyone allow us to move that information where it's needed for the decisions that need to be made or the activities that need to be undertaken in autonomy. And then going from what was historically a linear process, it used to be called, the acronym was TPED, but it was tasking, processing, exploitation, and distribution, taking that from a linear activity into a parallel processing and processes activity. Think cloud architectures, think operational capabilities that are done simultaneously rather than sequenced or um, separated by time and space in sequencing activities. Um, TPED was a very slow processing activity. It took days, weeks, months, sometimes years. Using AI, we get down to minutes and hours to understand an area, transmit the understanding, transmit what's important in the understanding, and move it around the battle space, particularly at the edge. And those edge-centric architectures are absolutely critical to making this work. We look at autonomy at the edge, we are objectively trying to get to what is called level 3 through 5. That is, things that augment our capabilities, things that assist us in making decisions, and then all the way to things that are autonomously done based on the knowledge that we have at the edge and the systems and the robotics being employed. Modeling and simulation is the last piece of this. It's absolutely essential because it allows us to look at things, do what if drills to change it, to look at the opportunities that might be there. We can employ things called digital twinning and shadow modes that allow us to understand the environment, run simulations against that environment, look at things that may happen only once in a lifetime and actually include it in our plans so that we're not surprised unintentionally. That kind of work is just absolutely critical. And the last piece of that modeling and simulation is that we can use synthetic data to augment the ground truth sensors. That synthetic data can help us inform the models, inform our knowledge, particularly on these one-off occasions that we're looking at something that just almost never happens, but could. And so you cover both in operational planning, both the most likely situations and the most dangerous situations. That's what AI does for us.
Okay. So at the edge, are we looking at the same basic implementations in terms of like sort of use cases, tangible, hands-on, where we have AI on cameras on a drone or on other sensors. What are there certain use cases that are specific and unique to special forces, or are we looking at some of the same use cases, perhaps?
Many of the use cases are generalized up into the general purpose forces and the strategic forces in a vertical integration type model. But a lot of the use cases, quite frankly, are unique to the collectors and the operations that the special operations forces do. And so what we're trying to understand is how do you vertically integrate that so that we can go up to decision makers in other types of forces dislocated in time and space,
Right.
and inform those forces in a way that is useful to them, both in the substance of it, but also in the availability of time and speed and quality, which are absolutely essential in those decision-making opportunities. So we look at it across that entire spectrum.
Okay, cool. So as we're thinking about this, what do we see as the biggest information security risks to having AI at the edge, particularly as it helps special forces build out this knowledge of the environment?
The difficulty here, quite frankly, is in cultural adaptation, right? Right up front. So, if you're going to bring a new system or a new way of doing business to a group of people, okay, they have to go through the stages of grieving, okay, and in those stages of grievement, they start with by denying that this will ever work, and then it's okay, I hate it, and then it moves to I'm going to compete with it, and then finally you kind of get to partnering with it.
Mhm.
Okay. And so that up front is when you look at something like information security risk, initially people are going, it just won't work. Can't do it. Not going to change my policies the way you want to do it. Then it goes to, okay, I really don't like what you're doing. Quit doing it. Okay. I refuse to let you do it. And then you finally start to get into the competition and all of those different phases. So in the risks to the security of the information, it's really easy to just say no. But the reality here is that the pros way outweigh the cons. So you can have physical compromise. You can have cases in which you lose a device, let's say, and then the enemy gets that device and reverse engineers it and now knows how to get into your networks. Things like that. You've got communications intercept opportunities where people try to intercept your comms when they're out and out there. And a lot of what we do there, 5G is really starting to make a difference in that area. 6G is coming along. The new quantum aware encryption standards help us protect the information and that kind of a thing. And we have capabilities and protocols that help us do inference compute at the edge. Inference being the compute that you have on your body, on your vehicle, whatever it is, out there at the edge. All of those architectures give us layered defenses against someone just intercepting it in general. Then you have the worries about jamming and spoofing inside of your information, and people getting in there and disrupting the signals and then confusing the activity, misdirecting the activity, deceiving you, etc. And a lot of what's happening in that space is ledger type protocols that give you high assurance that you know who you're talking to, that you know that the information that you're talking to has been in a ledger and now has some ground truth to it, and you can go back and compute. Recent activities with organizations like Signal, where you're talking to people, but you don't know who's in the conversation. Ledgers help you eliminate that threat, and so they're becoming quite important in this space. And then you have model poisoning, where the training data has been
Right.
tampered with, and you want to understand that you know that what you have is what you sent. Okay, and again, ledgers and encryption become really important in those areas. Supply chain attacks, such that your equipment was modified before you ever had the equipment, you don't know that it's modified, back doors, things like that. all have ways of being looked at, purified, zero trust, all of these different things help you there. And so the last one, which is probably the most dangerous and the most likely, is the insider threat. It's just somebody that's gotten inside, very proximate in geographic location to you, et cetera, and is now intercepting your final comms. And again, ledgers, here, and encryption are your best defenses in those activities. So those are a list, but at the end of the day, that list, even though it seems long and dangerous, is far outweighed by the things that you can do there.
Right, right. And on that list, a lot of those things are things that we battle even without AI.
True. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what's actually unique to AI, other than the model
No,
itself being, tampered
but
into.
I think it's important to understand that this is contested space. I mean, we wouldn't have this problem if it wasn't contested. It doesn't matter how you approach it, it's going to be contested. Okay, so you accept that going in. There is no perfect solution to anything that you do. But what we have done is start to think of that world as a surface model. And how big is the surface? And if you're defending the surface, you want to collapse it. And if you're offending on the surface, you want to expand it. And how do you control and operate in that surface is really what concept of operations is about. It's trying to understand your adversary's vulnerabilities. And what's unique in this space, I think, is that it is persistent, it's speed of light, it is intolerant to, wait a minute, I just want to take a few days to think about this. That's not going to happen. Okay. It's not going to go away. And so you have to have a decision matrix that is very quick in execution, oftentimes has to be automated. People don't like that word automation, but quite frankly, of the five domains, air, land, sea, oh, those are fine. But when you go to space and when you go to the electromagnetic spectrum and cyber, those are all speed of light, and there aren't any people there. Okay, so automation is really defined by the intent of the creator for the function that it's supposed to do, and then you have to let it do it. Because we can't think as fast as the speed of light. We can't be in space constantly. We obviously don't fit in cyberspace, and so that's where the disruption comes really in thinking about today's modern battle space.
Okay. Okay. Um, how will we get the warfighters, the operational units, even the special forces to leverage these AI tools and solutions that we're devising for them?
Uh, you know, that's the tough part. And it's kind of back to the stages of grieving and all of that. That kind of a mindset is, what are your adoption and adaption strategies to bring these kinds of capabilities to the force? How do you think about that? How do you change what historically has been a three generational model? So in the military, there are generally three generations: those who are coming in and are young, the middle management, and the senior management, so to speak. Okay. And the separation between the two is relatively dramatic. What's wonderful about the new force is it's STEM oriented. Okay. It came up understanding these kinds of things. It understands them. It trusts them. I mean, if I want to punish my children, I take away their phone. Okay. That's worse than spanking. That's worse than sending you to your, that's worse than grounding you. I mean, it's a fundamentally different thought process. And so the good news is we've got generations in here that can understand that. But when you look at process inside of the system, acquisition processes, requirements processes, training processes, et cetera, the adaption that we need there and the adoption side of the equation is we've got to get hands-on training to the maximum extent possible. We can't just give it to a couple, three people and say, oh, that's good enough. We'll figure out what it works. You have to get it to larger numbers and you have to do it quickly. Beta type strategies are really, really important here. The requirements process has to in the DoD has to fundamentally change. It can't be a 10 to 15-year process. 10 to 15 minutes is good for me. That's kind of where I think it ought to be. It's got to be much faster and it's got to be responsive to the edge. not to the core. Um, Having the headquarters in charge of this really disadvantages the edge. In commercial world, you can see it all over the place, but it really is the same there. And then you've got to change the test and evaluation criteria, how you think about test and evaluation, how you look at beta. But there are other things, particularly with AI, that are super important. Things like shadow modes. So I have a processor in my edge device or edge system. I can run both the load that has been put in for the normal training and activity, but I can put a next generation load in there at the same time. And every time the two don't agree, I get flagged. The user never sees the future one, and I can work on the system and create and improve it without divulging that knowledge. And that's a whole different way of thinking about training. And so I think those types of tools, along with the simulation and modeling, really change the game on how fast you can bring something to the edge. We're seeing in exercises, all over the place of the ability to have a problem one day and solve it that night and have it in the field the next day in software. It just that's where we really have to get to. We have to be able to do that. And it just takes work to change that process.
Right. What is the toughest challenge in training troops to work alongside the AI effectively or to leverage AI effectively?
I think it is a little bit different. I would look at this more about the user interfaces. Okay,
Okay.
how's this presented to the individual? Is it intuitive? Oftentimes, early on, for instance, with radios and things like pads and displays, we thought those were wonderful ways to bring it forward. But what do I have to do in the field to use those? I have to give up a hand, and I can't afford to give up a hand. So start thinking about augmented reality type capabilities that are visually displayed into the system, things that are intuitive to the extent that, okay, I grew up in the STEM environment. I know how this interface is going to work. I don't have to really think about it. And so I can move my fingers. I can do some memory type stuff with my body that allows me to use it in ways that somebody who hasn't seen it before would never even think of. We're almost unconscious in how fast we move our fingers and thumbs on our iPhone. Okay, those types of skills are just second nature. What it's like to work your way down through a menu of activities and capabilities on a system. Those are logical to us now, where heretofore that was never the case. You would get lost in it. So working in that side of it, and then looking for the right measures of effectiveness. Okay. A lot of times we'll look at a problem out there and we'll say, oh, I asked AI in a chat bot, to answer this question, and this is the ridiculous answer. Well, how you ask the question, how you understand that they're going to process it are all things that if you've lived in the Google life or even now in the large language models, you know that garbage in, garbage out is what you get. You understand that intuitively. You know how to ask questions. Those types of skills are assumed, okay, but they're not really, they shouldn't be. And you're learning a whole new discipline if you're a young person coming into this. But if it's got a base core that is familiar to you, it's a lot easier. So those I think are the things you really want to focus on.
All right, very good. Wow. So, all in all, what keeps you up at night when you think about integrating AI into our critical decision-making processes?
Uh, the first thing that comes to my mind is we're not going fast enough. We've got to increase our velocity in this area dramatically. And then I think how to think about vertically integrating these activities across the rest of the force. So if I am using my special forces to get the context and it stays in the special forces like it does in the intelligence community, it's of no value to anybody. The value is in the ability for the larger population to be informed and to be tailored for the problem they're actually going to have. And right now, the services mindset is one of global continuity. They train a soldier to go any place in the world and do the fundamental tasks of being a soldier. When the reality is, when they get there, that means I've got to take weeks, if not months, to adapt them to the desert or the Arctic or the ocean or whatever it happens to be. That's got to be eliminated. We've got to accept the fact that where you go makes a difference, and that contextual difference, the responsibility of special operating forces, has to be transmitted before you go, so that it is not just I arrive and now I have to figure out how to get water in the desert or whatever the problems are. That to me is worrisome because there's really no natural way to do that. As humans, we tend to husband our advantage very close, and we don't share very well in these kinds of situations. And we've got to figure out how to override that. AI is a great way to do it as long as we're allowed to get at the data. That's the critical piece.